what are we calling the new China shock, and where are we seeing it take place?
Yes, it's really China Shock 2.0 or 3.0, which is, as Gordon Hanson put it, he's one of the trio of economists who first coined the term back in the 90s and early 2000s. And before, we're really used to describing the China shock as something more specific to the U.S., describing the economic damage and job loss from this flood of Chinese imports, kind of back when China first joined the global trading system and the WTO. But today, we're seeing it much more broadly across the world. We're seeing it in Mexico, in Brazil, in places like Indonesia, like you just mentioned, and across Southeast Asia. So basically emerging market economies, which really rely on their manufacturing sectors for growth, both domestically and trying to export those goods for their economic growth, are facing a lot more competition from China. And the reason behind that, you may ask, is Trump's tariffs, President Trump's tariffs, as well as the reciprocal tariffs that are set to come in. So once China realized they could no longer export to the U.S. as easily, there was this big reshuffling of supply chains, and there was also a big gap in where they had to send their goods to. And so that's why we're seeing a lot more of those goods flowing to other countries.
Yeah, what are the governments of those other countries doing to address this? Because I'm aware of some responses from quite extreme all the way through to nothing at all.
Yeah, it's tough, right? These countries are basically in between a rock and a hard place because they have industries and workers telling them and pushing on them to do something about this because there has been wide-scale job loss, factories are closing down, factories are moving elsewhere, which is very similar to what we saw in the U.S. Rust Belt as well in the 90s and early 2000s. But they're kind of stuck because China is a major trading partner, a major purchaser of these countries' goods as well, and also a major source of foreign direct investment. So moves so far have included VAT, value-added taxes, small tariffs on steel or small packages, but they're really limited in what they can do.
China has been for a while trying to shift the focus from being just a manufacturing powerhouse to boosting domestic demand, and that's really taken top priority. Does that potentially change the strategy at all?
Yeah, it really depends if it works, right? This is something we've been hearing from China for a while. They've really underscored it in 2025. They said we're going to unveil all these programs, child subsidies, boosting pay in domestic, like in regional markets, in a normal way, at a normal pace. But it really depends if those things pan out, because the reality is that China has a close to $1 trillion trade deficit with the world. That means that it's just heavily exporting these goods still. And that's where the growth is coming from, is the reality. So if these consumer-focused programs work out, perhaps they could shift some growth that way. But so far, that's not been the case for them.